Welcome back. Today we are going to work on the stuff we had left over in the past episodes. Since this stuff is also covered by quests, let's start by opening the next chapter of our book. After being reminded that we are entering the work in progress area, we find a quest that reminds us of our Hyperen needs. We quickly complete it and then we get reminded on our main objective, a Hyperen coiled plasma forge. Making 16 coils for the quest is easy, but we have no use for such low amount of coils. We need 2000 for our DTPF, or 900 for a blast furnace. And the next quest requires us to make space-time, which is made in an Hyperen plasma forge, so this path is blocked. On the other side, after pulverizing one of the tesseracts we made to test our DTPF, we obtained some transcendent metal dust. Cooking that stuff is incredibly expensive. The process also requires some tungsten that ends up becoming celestial in the process. And, to cool it down, we have to add supercoolant and Titan steel to the freezer. While the reason is explained by the quest book, what we care about is that we now have the spinny ingot. And that was one of the two materials we needed for our space elevator upgrade. The other one is dimensionally shifted superfluid. This requires a bunch of things, but the first ingredient we notice is the next grade of purified water. And, before we can even start looking at how that new purification unit works, we notice a lack of quarks. Those are made in a cyclotron, so let's repurpose our quantum anomaly setup to a quark isolator 1. Once we obtained enough quarks, we notice one slightly bigger issue. To craft the purification plant structure, we need quite some diamonds, which are mostly going into making 100,000 infinity ingots. Since we have a DTPF, it is probably a better option to use that instead. However, while that recipe make a lot of infinity, it is also eating a lot of resplendent catalyst. And that was with a 50% fuel discount, thanks to having fully breached the dimensional boundaries by making Hyperen and neutronium for 8 hours straight. Which means that our current DTPF fuel production plant running on 350 amps UIV is not enough. So we push it even further by doubling the amount of machines, while also wall sharing the expensive laser. But the first thing we will want to do with our new infinity source is upgrade our component assembly line. That way, we will be able to use less infinity for the components required for our upcoming machines. Such as the blocks we needed for the last tier of water purification plant. Those expensive components are also needed in the catalyst that this plant works with. So, after a day of intensively staring at our infinity stonks, we managed to stock up enough materials to craft the required parts. And, after also getting the specialized quark catalysts, we are ready to purify our water at subatomical levels. As usual, we have to solve some logistical puzzle to make that machine work. After some tests, we figured out that this machine only cares about the sequence of inserted stuff, so we did some math analysis to find an optimal sequence of stuff to insert to find the correct combination as fast as possible. With that, it was just a matter of doing a little bit of redstone circuitry to properly manage the sequence loading and insertion. And here you can see the train of quark releasing catalysts being loaded up and then inserted in a fixed order. And, with that, we managed to obtain the subatomically perfected water and the baryonic stabilized matter, which we merge into the dimensionally shifted superfluid required for our new space elevator motors. With those, we can now run the mining modules Mk3, capable of sending drones far enough to collect draconic cores. But, for the moment, we only found trash. So, you know the drill. While the new drills are being forged, we can do some new quests. And since we still haven't done the new components, let's see how those are made. The new weird material we have to use to handle the strength of 33 million volts is proto-harconite steel. To get that material, we start by coating an infinity fine wire with a special blend of expensive materials. Once the first coating is done, we complete the material by freezing some dimensionally shifted superfluid around it. After using this new material for all of the UIV components, we move on to the next quest, the new superconductor. And here we face a new issue. To work that stuff, we need an eternal coiled EBF or a hypogen coiled DTPF. So, you know the drill. We go do something else. Luckily, it looks like our mining drones managed to find one draconic core schematic between all of the space trash. Now we can craft draconic cores and thus unlock the tier 2 fusion crafter. By the way, to get the required dicerium, we can now send a mining drone on some far asteroids to collect some. And then we quickly infuse it, thus upgrading our fusion crafter, which we then upgrade again with the wyvern stuff. And, with that, we can finally craft dragon blood out of cheap stuff. The reason we did that was to get more hypogen. However, getting there took us quite some time and, in the meanwhile, our DTPF kept making hypogen to keep warm, making already enough for the new coils we needed. And I gotta say, solidifying that material is a really hard task. And after hours of solidifying screws, we managed to complete our new DTPF. As with the old one, to keep it warmed up, we set it up to make hypogen whenever there are no craftings queued up. And this one with hypogen coils can do the recipe that has twice the yield. And it can also do new materials, such as space-time. With that, we can finally craft crafting input buffers, which will allow us to make better looking crafting setups. This input will indeed contain both solids and fluids, have infinite caching and separate the materials of the various recipes. But running 2 DTPF is starting to put too much of a strain on our generators. To boost our production, we are going to throw some hypogen in our fuel. And then we also add some of the leftover heavy redox from the redox polymer setup. And now it is time to see how our new fuel does. And it looks like it can fill up our battery in 3 weeks. With that extra production, we can even do a bit of overclocking on our DTPFs. To do so, we can use a screwdriver to remove the throttle we previously applied to the power plug. Going back to our progression, we can now use our new DTPF for making the new UIV superconductor, which we use for the new energy hatches. Next, we could work on the final tier of coils. However, those look quite expensive, not to mention we won't get them with our current space-time production. Looking for a solution, we can try moving to the other quest branch, making a new MV circuit. Which basically means just adding a new layer to our circuit factory. And, behind that circuit hides a solution to our problems. With more power, we can get space-time faster. And the way we have to resort to get enough power at that stage is by harvesting all of the energy emitted by a whole star by building a Dyson sphere around it. And, while the expensive parts of the structure are being crafted, we can work on the long chain of recursive crafts for modules we will be constantly launching in space. And here the main issue is 2 materials which are not easy to come by. To get those, we can kidnap a couple of mobs and get some armors out of their clones. However, some of the dropped armors are damaged and our macerator doesn't like to recycle stuff that is not brand new. So, to make it accept those items, we first have to repair them using an energetic infuser. Once we have tidied the wardrobe, we can send it through an industrial maceration stack. And, with that we can now start stocking up modules for our upcoming Dyson sphere. Meanwhile, the structure to launch those is not crafting properly. The tesseracts are not crafting, and our DTPF is not working. The issue seems to be that we run out of fuel. Our fuel plant indeed can't process fuel fast enough. The recipe has a base crafting time of almost 1 hour at UIV voltage. Not once, but on multiple steps. To fix that issue, we can now afford a plasma mixer. That thing will do all of the steps in 5 seconds and with parallelization. But there are no discounts on the amount of power used. Indeed, this machine is so power intensive that no cable or laser can power it. How do we make it run then? Well, we can give it energy from the wireless network, which is a virtual battery with virtually infinite power capacity that high-tier Lapatronic capacitor banks can swap energy with. Once the energy is rebalanced with the wireless battery, we can use our mixer. But that didn't really fix the issue, we just move it to our fusion reactors. They can't keep up with all of those plasmas. And that is not the only fusion issue. We are also having trouble with the metastable organesson production, which is made by our smaller Mark IV reactors. To fix those problems, we should do a Mark IV compact reactor, which will do higher parallels and, unlike its predecessors, has perfect overclocking, meaning it will be more than 16 times faster than the compact 3 on tier 1 plasmas. To craft it, we only lack of platinum and one of the plastics. Usually, to fix those issues, we would upgrade our stocking storage or find the bottleneck in our processing chain and speed it up. However, that is a task which has become hard to manage and is starting to cause lag. And we now have a better solution for those early game long processing chains. The quantum force transformer can do the whole plat line as a single recipient, can be easily overclocked and parallelized. And we won't have to work with any of the involved fluids. For the plastic, it won't simply do polybenzimidazole at once. It will also do all of the other simpler polymers at the same time. And here we have our new machine, making a lot of plastics in a single step. While our plastics are stocking up, we can make a second machine for processing platinum. And since this machine is super fast even with low amount of catalyst and power, we can clean up the old plat line. Meanwhile, we have managed to gather all the ingredients required for our new fusion reactor. And, after building some more machines to process everything, we managed to complete our new reactor. This reactor is so fast that the bottleneck is now our plasma mixer. But we can quickly fix that issue by increasing its maximum parallel and letting it eat our whole battery. While the mixer waits for the leftover energy to be sent into the wireless network, we can work on building more machines to speed up the crafting speed of our Dyson sphere. And we can even build machines in parallel by using Loki Ring from the Funny Flower mod. And with all of those new machines, we quickly complete all of the parts of our new source of power, the Dyson sphere. The issue of that structure is that the modules we use to encase a star can end up colliding and thus break. So we have to constantly feed new modules and some computation to better calculate the module trajectories, lowering the needed replacements. To move all of that energy back to our base, we could craft one more really ultimate battery, but I think a wormhole generator sounds cooler. With that, we now have enough power to further speed up our hydrogen production. With the power of 40,000 UHV amps, our production went from half ingot to more than 2 every second. To further increase our plasma forging capacity, we use that Hyperen to multiply our DTPFs. And, even with 4 DTPFs running at that power, we are still making less than 1 ingot of space-time each second. However, if we manage to get eternal coils, we can use a recipe that will use less than half the ingredients to make 4 times as much. The main issue is that eternal coils, other than requiring quite some space-time and a new UIV circuit, also require an eternal singularity. Getting these is quite expensive and also needs some stuff, such as soul sand, which we haven't really automated. When we needed a couple of blocks for a single singularity it was doable, now we have to find a better way. And I think the best way is to not use soul sand at all. We can get a singularity by compressing a little bit of space-time. However, that requires a stabilized black hole, which is a whole new rabbit hole to explore. And I think that is a good moment to start working on that, since this is the last main quest of the current tier. So, after working millions of iron dusts, we managed to build a structure strong enough to support and contain a black hole. This machine has some peculiar requirements. First, we need a black hole seed to open a black hole so we can compress stuff. Once the black hole becomes too unstable, we close it with a collapser. So, once everything is ready, we can throw a black hole seed into the machine and admire our creation, which we use to craft eternal singularities. However, our black hole is going to slowly decay, thus becoming unusable for the task. And, in that state, it is going to void our ingredients. So we make it collapse to clean up the machine. And now it is time to fully automate that process. After doing a little bit of math, we find out that, by also adding some extra stabilizer, we can craft a batch of 2800 singularities with a single black hole. So, we quickly build a custom AE2 pattern with all of the stuff that we will have to use. The items will be split so that a group of timers can properly manage the black hole. The first one is going to let the black hole get close to the end of its lifespan. During this phase, the black hole will allow us to do 88 singularities at a time. Then, just before the critical point, the timer will trigger a second timer, which will halt the decay of our black hole by inserting liquid space-time inside it. The material costs grows exponentially, so we do not want to let this process go on for too much time. And, at this stage, our black hole will compress 350 items at once. And once the stabilizer cost becomes too high, we collapse the hole. Now that we have enough singularities, we can start working on the last tier of heating coils. And that required us to build a new set of solidifiers to get all of the ingots and screws. Then our array of wire factories prepared the cabling. Finally, with all of our 14 generic purpose assembly lines, we slowly crafted the new coils. While we craft the 7000 coils required for the DTPF upgrade, we can also use the singularities for upgrading our ore facility. The issue is that we can't let our ore facility run because it will quickly clog our storage room. But now we can afford better storage. And we are going to use it to stock up the stuff we are making in unlimited amount right on the production site. Meanwhile, after fixing the AFK counter, we stocked up enough coils to upgrade our DTPFs. With those, we can now make cheaper space-time, cheaper Hyperen, one stack of infinity out of a single catalyst and many other latter game recipes. And, with that, I think we can close this chapter. So, what was the lesson of today's episode? Always build your fusion reactors in a tunnel for nice visuals. See you next time for even bigger multi-blocks. Bye bye.